What's up, guys? This is David, aka Reverse Long, and I'm here with Dan McClory. Um, he has a unique background. He's gonna go talk about it, and he also has some other things to talk about with sports and football and all this new thing of that of like sports ownership and these topics. But so first of all, Dan, I wanted to ask you. I was looking at your background. You have a very unique background. So with Boustead Securities and also other financial investment. So how did you get involved with like the whole finance world?
So yeah, Boustead Securities, we're a leading underwriter of small cap IPOs. We have about 50 that are in registration right now. And it's an outgrowth of having invested in companies and understanding how critical it is to have them adequately capitalized and to have opportunities for liquidity by listing them on major stock exchanges like NYSE, NASDAQ, the London Stock Exchange, Hong Kong, a number of venues throughout the world. So I had invested personally in various companies that had helped them develop and grow and get listed on stock exchanges. And I said, you know what, I should just be an investment banker. So about 20 years ago, I decided to do just that. And it's evolved into the practice that we have at Boustead and Company, which is the parent of Boustead Securities, a US broker dealer, but we're present throughout the world, places like London, Zurich, Hong Kong, Singapore. We're opening up in Monaco, Mauritius, and Puerto Rico. About a third of our clients are in Asia, a third are in North America, a third are in Europe.
Wow. Okay, so all over the world. I didn't know that. So okay, so Boustead or is Boosted, right? Boosted or
Boosted. Boosted is like
Boustead.
what you would say in Boston if you were stealing a car. He boosted a car. But no, this is Bousted,
Okay.
like taking a bow after
Yeah,
one of
yeah.
your Academy Award winning
Okay,
performances, and
Bousted.
then
Okay.
stead like instead. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And I was looking at your LinkedIn. So you had like for Chinese IPOs. So I wanted to ask you like are Chinese IPOs still going on or was that like paused for the moment because of,
It was
political
paused, but they're back going on.
they're
There's
back
probably
back.
been 10 of them done this year. We've done two, and they're starting to come back. Again, in the small cap space, there's been maybe one major bulge bracket Chinese IPO, but they're slowly but surely starting to come back.
Gotcha. And so what's the whole thing with the Cayman Islands? So the Chinese like they formed the entity in the Cayman Islands and then they listed on the Nasdaq like they go through you or do you guys do anything with the Cayman Islands or are you separate from that?
So virtually all of our international issuers use an offshore holding company. It's more favorable to use one. It could be BVI, it could be Cayman. We've seen Bermuda lately. So that becomes the holdco, the listco. Now, in the case of Brera, my football team in Milan, we did an Irish listco, an Irish PLC. So you start with that, and then underneath it, you add in the operating company or companies. But Cayman has been the destination of choice for a lot of Chinese and Asian companies, but we see it elsewhere with European companies as well.
Now, are you familiar with some of like the Chinese IPOs that went like really parabolic and then crashed like last year and a couple of years before? Like what's going on specifically? Do you know anything with like the Chinese at all? Like because I heard of like these like Chinese groups that were doing some crazy things to the stocks and they will just go crash, because China was locked down during the pandemic, so no one could go there in person and go check it out. Anything did you observe any of those?
Several. And I think it's a combination of factors. One is, and you alluded to it, the extreme pent-up demand when listings were paused or halted. And that started happening about 3 years ago with the geopolitical environment between the US and China, and then the SEC and then NASDAQ taking a pretty hard line about really not wanting to see, in almost racist way, Chinese companies being listed in the US. So that started to create a lot of constipation of deals. So there's all these deals people wanted to bring to market. After
Now,
that, you saw
uh-huh.
markets like Hong Kong, which are prolific for high volumes of trading, lots of shares flying around. Those markets kind of came to a halt during COVID and because of market conditions. So when the US market resumed, and some of these pop and drops that you're talking about took place going back to the end of 2019, beginning of 20 and into 21, you saw a lot of suppressed demand that was finally being met. So many of those deals were the first offerings that these investors could partake in a long time, and they went bananas and just wanted to load up as much as they could. So I think a combination of those sort of market factors and forces, and the market having been paused, led to a lot of that early uptick, early volume in many of those names, and then subsequent crashes afterwards.
I see. So are you familiar with like the movie The China Hustle? Have you ever seen that?
I've absolutely seen it. Yeah, I'm familiar with
Yeah.
several people that were featured there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So one
I
guy,
know the executive producer, Frank Marshall, Mark Cuban had a role in it, so I know all those
yeah,
guys.
yeah,
Yeah.
he had a role in it. It's crazy. So one of the guys that went there to investigate a company, they locked him up in China. They just like held him up at the airport. They locked him up for a couple of years. So is that still like the case like in China? Is like, they because like I'm it's like it crossed my head after seeing that movie that they can run up these stocks in China and like they're in China and the SEC or anybody can't really go over there. So like, and if someone were to go over there and expose it, then they would be locked up in jail because it's communist. So is that like is that too drastic of a thinking?
I think you're confused of different factors that aren't in fact related. So you got the regulatory context. My recollection from the China Hustle is the guy that was detained because somebody at a company that listed didn't like what he was uncovering and wanted to make life difficult for him. So it had nothing to do with volumes or disclosure, things like that. It was like they didn't like what this guy had uncovered, is my recollection. And that it's kind of a docudrama. I take a fair amount of that movie with a grain of salt, if we want to call it that. So that's one thing. But I think the second thing is there's been some major developments in the last few years. One is that finally the Chinese government has come to terms with the SEC and the PCAOB, which is the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, the auditor of the auditors, to allow inspections of China-based PCAOB auditors that had been completely stonewalled, resisted, unable to proceed. And the big four were the biggest affected parties in that whole scenario. So, in fact, at least through the auditor, there is an ability of various regulators to reach out and touch people in China. The SEC is a slightly different story. But from what we've seen, the emphasis is really on having these deals, these IPOs, subscribed to by investors who are either resident here in the US or transact through a broker that's located here, and not some broker in some other geography where there may be difficulty in getting through to them if they want to get information, they being the regulators, about what kind of trading activity had taken place.
I got you. And so you mentioned a little earlier that, so the Chinese, it was paused and now it's not. And like, there's some element that considering race or whatever. But is it really racism? Because, or is it just like something like some really nefarious activity going on in the market where a lot of these Chinese stocks from the Cayman Islands are squeezing like insane levels and there's obvious manipulation going on. So like maybe that's pump and dumps schemes that going on and it needs to be eradicated, so like for example we had HKD last year. That was one out of the Cayman Islands. Chinese pumped like crazy. ILAG. I know for example one from Boustead, what do you call it, PETZ, that one squeezed and they did an offering. It went from 60 cents and squeezed all the way to $9 in the after hours. And like I heard rumblings about there's being like margin loan scams in China and some other boiler room pump and dump boiler rooms, going on. So like why? And then I see like WhatsApp groups with like fake Chinese girls. They even have, I don't know if you're aware, like on Tinder and stuff, these Chinese profiles, Chinese girls around mid-30s, they seem to be, and they try to swindle guys to go buy their stock. And this is all happening with Chinese stocks over and over and over and over. And then we have the China hustle. So like documentary, that was from 2011. So like why is that race? I don't see it as race. I see it like that's just this is blatant stuff that needs to be, it's just not good for the market. It doesn't seem like. What do you think of that? Like, what are your thoughts?
So remember what I commented on just a couple minutes ago, and I've heard you out here. So, number one, the geopolitical situation caused the SEC under its prior chairman, certainly now with Gensler, to really be anti-China. So they were basically told stop all these Chinese listings. Okay, that's what I'm referring to as racism. That in and of itself. Now, price swings and volume movements, those absolutely should be looked into by regulators and have been. And I think they're putting together the thesis under which they can dissect those deals to find out what caused things to happen. As I mentioned before, what we're seeing is deals getting approved that have predominantly non-Chinese investors or Chinese investors who are domiciled here in the US, who have brokerage accounts that can be reviewed, who have FINRA members that have something that they have to answer to. So I think gone are the days where there might be rogue investment banks and brokers in all different parts of the world that can do things that don't conform to our laws. So if they don't, it should be eradicated. It should be brought to a halt. It should be looked into. But I think now with the current crop of maybe a dozen or so Chinese IPOs that have happened thus far in 2023, you're starting to see much more measured offerings. Of a dozen, I can only think of one, and it happened yesterday, or 2 days ago, Hougaard, that has had anything like the trajectory that you're talking about. So I think how to eradicate it has been figured out. I think it's been addressed, and I think it's clear what Chinese companies have to do in order to list. I think it has nothing to do with being a Cayman Islands company, by the way.
No, Hougaard, not yet, but who knows what they're planning. But however, yesterday, TOP, there were some messages being sent on WhatsApp of these Chinese girl characters telling people to buy and to short. So the Chinese, these are Chinese boiler rooms in China. Like they're actively doing this, and there's a lot of people in like myself that talk through all these chat rooms, and it's just passed around. Like thousands of traders know about this, and it's an
So it must be
active.
true. I have no ability. I mean, I'm joking when
I
I
mean,
say that. I was on the
I
internet. It must be true. But I have
No,
no
I see it
awareness of
myself.
what you're describing.
I'm getting targeted myself by these Chinese WhatsApp characters. I have a right here. They message random people with certain zip codes, and they say, "Hey, my uncle says to buy this stock. My uncle says." It's rampant. All these groups with bad English. It's all Chinese, and it's all Chinese stocks, and a majority of them are from the Cayman Islands. And I have seen it personally with my eyes. So it's not just on the internet. These are characters on Tinder. When I go on Tinder and I match a girl, an Asian girl in her 30s mostly, this happened. I'm in Los Angeles and I get this. And just like the movie, The Tinder Swindler, this is like the Chinese stock swindler. And so
If I were you, I would let the regulators know about this because this sounds like
I'm sure
something
I'm
very
sure they
interesting for
know.
them to look into.
I'm sure they
I don't know. It's
know.
first I've heard through you. But David,
But
were
yeah,
we gonna talk
yeah.
about
So yeah,
Brer today? Were
let's
we
move
gonna
on. Let's move on.
we've
Let's
spent 18 minutes talking about
Yeah,
deals or
13
something
minutes.
like that.
Yeah, no,
So,
no, 13 minutes.
anyways,
But yeah, thanks for your comments on that because I just wanted to, you're in that world,
sounds
so to
like
speak.
you have a thirst for knowledge in this whole area. So that's
Yeah,
interesting.
absolutely. So yeah, so what's tell me about Brea. Okay, so